Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is National Master Bela, and let's take a look at the standings from the Eastern Open. So we have 8 players with 100% with 2 points, and I'm waiting for the pairings for round 3. Meanwhile, I will show you my second game. I was black, and I was playing with Oscar, very, very talented kid. And he played the Spanish, or the Ruy Lopez opening. I played a6 to attack his bishop. Usually when a piece comes in your territory, you want to attack it and you want to kick it out. You want to protect your territory here. Basic principles are to fight for the center, develop your knights towards the center, the bishop, and prepare castling. You want your king to be safe and sound. Rook e1, he protected this pawn because if he takes here and he wants to pick up a pawn, in the worst case, I have this double attack, but because my bishop is on e7 in this case, I can just capture, and I don't have to be afraid of this rook e1 because the bishop is in between here. I could move the knight away and I'm fine. I could attack his knight and then take on f2. Obviously white has to play queen e2, and then we can take, or we can play for more with d3, but black has no problems here. Black has the bishop pair in compensation for the double pawns. Rook e1, b5, attacking the bishop. Now white was threatening to take and then take on e5. So b5, bishop b3, and castle. You see both of the sides, they castle. Kings are safe and sound, kings are on the same side. And now white needs a plan. And usually in the Ruy Lopez in the Spanish, this is one of the main ideas, to play c3 and d4. So for example, if I play d6, let's say I want to play bishop g4 and bishop b7, then white plays d4, and every single time when black captures on d4, white will have the dual center. These two pawns here, they play a huge role. They control the center, they restrict the black pieces, and they gain space advantage. So you have a lot of space behind these pawns to develop and maneuver your pieces. I choose to play d5 here. It's called the Marshall Gambit. It is a gambit because I sacrifice a pawn. This pawn was attacked 2 times. I was only defending it 1 time. So I sacrifice this pawn, and the biggest reason why I sacrifice this pawn is because, 1, white doesn't have this knight from f3, which we know from the class that's the main defender of the king, that knight. And I traded that knight, and now I can line up my pieces against the king, and I can start attacking the king. Black has compensation for the pawn, but no more than that. This is all well-known theory. Queen h4. Here h3 will be a mistake, because after bishop takes h3, pawn takes h3, queen takes h3, you can't really defend the mate. We see the black pieces coming in, attacking, and I can take this bishop, and then I play queen h2 and queen f2. So this is all well known why h3 is a mistake. Maybe I should put a question mark here for h3 for those of you that want to learn this opening for black. And g3. Now after g3 we have complex of weak squares around the king, or the Swiss cheese, the way we call it in our classes. These squares are weak around the king, and you can put the pieces on the squares And black already has ideas here. Queen d3, obviously, he has to fight for the white squares and control the white squares, defend the white squares. And now black has different plans and ideas here. On the king side, playing f5 with king h8. We can also lift this rook on the 6th rank. We can double up the rooks. I choose the old-fashioned way here. I did not look into this for a very long time. I used to play like a kid with rook e8 and rook e6. This, back in the days, this was the main line. This was the main idea. I like the fact that the rook could come on the 6th rank. I like the fact that I could double up if I need to. I like the fact that I can push f5, f4. Usually white will play queen f1 and queen h5. I think this is called the Spassky line. The idea is that you don't want to trade queens, and then you can pick on this queen if you need to. If you want to, if you don't want to play for more, let's say a4, and then you can always get a draw, in the worst case. But with rook e8, the idea of queen h5 is to defend this knight. So when pawn takes, and the bishop takes the knight, you can always have this option to take back with the queen to not lose this pawn. If you take with the pawn and the queen takes b5, now in this scenario you have rook b8 attacking the queen, and if the queen goes all the way back, you can take this pawn, you can get your pawn back. Here black has actually compensation. The only thing that is, when you take here, you leave the back rank, right? And then this is annoying check. And now if you want to play bishop f8, this bishop is pinned, and white open up the files on the queen side, and you don't have that activity anymore. So you can play this h6 to move the king up here, and then try to take on b2. And when he plays b4, this pawn is actually weak. And if white wants to play for a win here, you cannot hide the queen, so you will have a draw here, right? Can black go for more? So let's say I want to go crazy. Can I implement this f5, f4 in? So I want to play f4, f3, queen f2, and f4. So this was my idea. Let's see what is happening here, because if you take with the pawn, then I have this check. And finally I get to the king. And if you take here, and I take, and then you take, now we see we got to the king finally, right? And everything opened up. This is completely winning here for black, because the king cannot go anywhere, and just gonna lose the queen. Okay, so in the game, white played a4 without queen f1. It's very similar. He wants to take on b5, he wants to open up the file for his rook. And I played the Spassky move that I knew, in the line with queen h5. I've seen some of the grandmasters taking on a4 and pushing f5 or rook f2 e8, but optically this pawn looks so weak, right? So f5, let's say you take here, f4, now the rook on f8 and the rook on e6, they are both of them active. The bishop is blocked in, so I can use the square for my rook. So white has to be really careful here. So let's say you get greedy with rook takes c6 and you think you're winning here. Now the f pawn plays a huge role because I'm threatening queen h2, queen h1 mate. You have to take back. But now everything opened up. I'm threatening queen h2 mate again. And you don't have time to take the knight. Because the f rook opened up. So this is really complicated here. Black has huge attack here. Let's say he takes take. We see everything opened up. King h1 is the only square. And everything comes with check. So instead of taking an a4, so this is an interesting line, and more something that I should prepare and look into it, right? Or if you're a very aggressive player and you like to play the Marshall Gambit, then this is something that you should also consider. Queen h5 is what I knew much better. Well, I was more familiar. I played it growing up, and white captured on b5 and opened up the file for his rook. We see this rook get activated and rook a6. And here it was attacking on c6. And in my mind, I said, oh, how can I stop rook takes c6? So my first thought, obviously, was to move the bishop away and defend the pawn with the rook. But then in my mind is like, can I play rook e8? And if he takes here, take here. And if he takes here, then I have mate. And if he takes, I take, he takes. Can he take on b5 and pin everything here? So, and when you play knight e7, we see that white has these three connected pass pawns, bishop pair. Now white has the bishop pair. We are on the defending side, and he has tremendous compensation because this pawn is just rolling. So I missed this queen b5 here. So when he took on c6, I'm like, wow. I had different ideas. I wanted to put a piece on f4. That was my first idea, and I missed knight f4. This knight f4 is winning the game. So after pawn takes, rook g6. Let's say you play king h1. Check, check, and mate. And let's say you play king f1, and we see the light squares, the complex weak squares are weak. Let's say you play knight f1 and discover check, and I attack your queen, and you cannot take my queen because the knight is pinned, right? So in the game, I miss knight f4, and if you play queen b1, then check, king g2, and you can sacrifice the knight. Now we see the rook is hanging, and we see the knight is hanging. So what happens if I take the rook? Check, you take, check. We see this bishop cutting the king off, and the f file opens up. We check, and checkmate. After knight takes f2, let's say bishop takes f2, queen h3, king g1, and now rook h6. We discussed about this idea. This will be the running square for the king, but it's controlled by this bishop. So you cannot run away with the king. Check, you stopped queen h1, right, with queen e4. And now bishop takes g3. Bishop takes g3, and we've seen this checkmate before. I'm threatening mate and pin to win, or pin it to win it. King e1, and the white is trying to run away, but is not over. Rook takes 8, and opposite colors of bishop. The side who attacks is a piece up. Here black is attacking, but he's already up a rook, so this is completely winning. So let's go back to the game, and I played rook e8, and I wanted to stop rook c6 with bishop g3. This was a miscalculation because I didn't see queen b5, and when it took on c6, that's when the game actually started. So here, now I played knight f4, and I start calculating here, and I found knight f4, and the idea was very similar to what I showed you guys. What would you guys play here with black, knowing that the g file opened up? Would you play bishop f5 and rook g6? What would you guys play? Or would you play bishop h3 first? Obviously you got to work on the white squares. So the threat is more important than execution. So you're threatening bishop f5 with discovered check, and king h1 doesn't work because checkmate. Knight f1, bishop f1, knight g3, and we've seen this before because you can move the knight because it's pinned. So after knight f4, my opponent played queen f1. If you play queen b1, I was preparing queen g2. You have to take here, and now I take, and I'm threatening check and mate. If you take here, then you're going to get mated this way. If you play bishop d5 to stop the mate and control the white squares, then I just take my piece. I take a piece on d5, and you're down a piece. So the only move for him was queen f1. And after bishop h3, I trapped the queen. The queen cannot move anywhere. And he captured on e6. I captured the queen, and he captured on d6, and I captured on e6. And he captured my bishop. Now what happens? I have a knight, he has a knight. I have a rook, he has a... So for the queen, he has a rook, a bishop, and 2 pawns, right? So this is called unbalanced material. And in my mind, probably I was a little bit relaxed because I was up a queen. So that was the mistake number one. I knew I was better, but in my mind, I thought that it would be an easy win. So what happens when you up material and you're winning? You're not so focused anymore, and all it takes is just a few moves and you're in trouble. So here I realized that I have problems with the back rank. So I had to make a loop for my king, and obviously I wanted to trade pieces and go in an endgame with the queen versus the two pieces. Uh, I played f6. In my mind was like my rook is defended. I also create a loft, and now finally I can play knight g5, forcing him to take. But the correct move would have been h6, so my king will be safe and sound. Here we will see in the game why. So I played f6. He played really well, activating his rook, and we see that the two rooks are ready to come in. And I played knight g5. I was really confident here. After knight g5, bishop takes, queen takes g5, and suddenly I realized that I cannot stop doubling up the rooks on the 7th rank. I was also low on time, and I had to make this moves pretty fast, but I calculated all of this when I won the queen, so I was in the home territory, you know, I was still feeling fine here. And this was my mistake here, queen f5. In my mind, I wanted to defend this pawn, move the g pawn up, and give up the queen for the two rooks. H5 was the correct move. You again creating the loop to go far away from the rooks, right? If they ever gonna check you, free the rook to go in, and now to go here and pin the knight. So let's say rook takes, queen takes, rook takes, king takes, the knight is pinned, and I can bother these pawns from behind, attack them, and capture them, right? Uh, it should be a draw with correct play, but these pawns are weak and it's much harder to play on the white side. Instead, I played queen f5 and g5. I wanted to have a better pawn structure in this endgame. I knew he's going to give up the two rooks for the queen. He shouldn't. And probably if I would have been white, I would have played for a win in a different way, because I have this option of giving up the two rooks for the queen anytime. So I can make I can improve this line, right? So the white has problems with the king. So same story. You gotta create a loop for the king. Yes, it cost you a pawn, but when the queen goes away, your king can move up, and then the knight can join to the party, and then the pass pawn goes up. So let's say you come back d6, and you can't really move the rook away because you get mated in the back rank. So you only have waiting moves, and we see that white is waiting to the last second for this rook g7. So let's say now I can play with rook c8. So, and the knight could join to the party. So this looks really good. This is winning for white. Instead, I knew he's gonna give up his two rooks for the queen, and this was the end game that I wanted to go in. We see that I don't have a h pawn. My pawns are connected. So this is a tiny bit better optically. And I knew that I had to activate my rook. Rook has to be active, flexible, belongs to open files, and you want to go in and attack the pawn from behind or from the second rank. He attacked my pawn, and I played king g6. I seen this line, and in my mind was like, his knight is disconnected from his king. So if I can connect my rook with the king, Actually, I can turn this game back around with the king and the rook. And that's exactly what happened. I activated my king in the endgame, and he stopped my king going forward. He did not rush taking the pawn, and after g4, now everything turned around. My king is active. Rook is cutting the king on the second rank. I'm threatening mate. You have to push the h pawn, and I'm picking up the pawn. We see opposition here. I'm threatening mate, and I created a pass pawn. Here, white has 3 pawns and a knight, right, for my rook. But white problem is his king, not the material. So safety of the king is always number one. I played king f3. I don't want this knight to come with any kind of checks. And I'm threatening mate again. And now it was time to push the f pawn. Knight d6, and I pushed f4. So now suddenly I want to make progress with the f pawn, and I want to threat checkmate in the back rank. Meanwhile, I have to watch the pawns, but the rook could watch the pawns from behind. And he needs 4 moves. 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. So I have plenty of time to stop the pawns. Knight f5, and I did not find the best move here. In my mind was like, he has no checks. I have time to pick up the pawns, and I really wanted to disconnect these pawns. I really wanted the c pawn. So he got really close here, right? This knight is defending the pawn. This knight is defending this pawn. I'd give a check, and by hand, like, you know, you always know that the rook belongs behind the enemy pawns, because the rook can be active. You could still check the king if you need to, and the rook is active. If you will be in the front of the pawn, it's passive, right? So that's why I went with the rook behind, and he got really close, and he could get wrong really fast here. Let's say I play king e4 to attack the knight, d6. Let's say I take the knight, and suddenly I cannot stop the d pawn, so I will lose this angle. Let's say I play king g4 to attack the knight, then the same thing, right? So the only move was rook h5 to attack the knight, to pick up the pawn with check, and then I could catch the pawn either way. I could go back or rook d8. So he played knight d4, check, and king belongs in the center. You want active king. I was attacking the knight and the pawn. He played knight e6. Now, if you take this pawn with check, king c3 and rook h5, this is what happened in the game. h7, and if you take here, then knight g5 check, and suddenly you lose your rook, and the king is in the box and could catch the pawn. And this will be a draw because I pick up the pawn, and you cannot checkmate only with one knight. He decided to give up his knight for the pawn, because if he moves his knight away, let's say knight f8, then the knight he can't catch this pawn. And I can queen and check, and the rook holds the square, and my king is in the box in the worst case, right? So I don't have to calculate that if I catch or I don't catch the pawn. This unfortunately was lost for white because I pushed the king on the side, and I used opposition, and I was threatening mate, and this is just a check, and I pick up the pawn and then checkmate with the king and the rook, right? So everybody knows how to checkmate with the king and the rook. You have to push the king in one of the corners using your king and the rook. So this game I do not advise for any of our students from our after school programs. We have over between 50 to 100 kids in after schools. I really don't advise either for any of the students from our nighttime beginner classes. This is really, really advanced. So what did we learn today? We discussed a new opening, the Spanish opening, and we learned the Marshall Gambit, which starts with d5. And you want to give up a pawn. You want white to waste time to capture a pawn, so he falls behind development. He doesn't develop his pieces. We also learned about the main defender of the king, which is this knight. You trade it off, and then the king is weak. We also learned about the complex of weak squares, the Swiss cheese, and then you can use the squares to put your pieces on the squares to exert pressure for initiative, for attack, activating all your pieces, lifting the rook. And this is the idea from Spassky with queen h5, with the pendulum of the bishop, with bishop f5, g4, if you want to play for a draw, but I never play for a draw. I always play my games out. And here, knight f4. This is the winning move here. I think white should play a piece on f1, like queen f1 usually, and then you could play rook e8. If rook a6 now, the queen is on f1, so we can protect the king. And to play for win, you will have to take on e3. Black has the bishop pair, and this, like we've seen before, will be a mistake for white because this square is controlled by the bishop, so I don't have to worry about the back rank mate. And if you take here, then you will lose the game. So this is actually very instructive. Bishop takes g3, queen takes f7, queen takes f7, bishop takes x7, king takes x7, pawn takes. And instead of taking the pawn, check. And if you come out, check, and I take the knight, and you're up a bishop. You also have a passed pawn on this side. Okay, it takes some work to do, but this is winning. And if you play knight f1, then you play bishop h3, and you're still gonna win the knight. Check. And you have to put the rook behind the pawns. So you have to fight against these pawns, block the pawns, and then you can move your king up and the pawns up and come with your counterplay. But you have to stop the pawns first. d5, if this pawn, let's say, is trying to make progress, this will be my first thought. Let's see, c4, king g4. These pawns are making progress, but this bishop is so strong. The rook is so well placed. And again, we've seen this idea from in the game, activating the king, playing for a checkmate, cutting the king on the second rank. So he has this check, but black can pick up the pawns here. So I hope you guys enjoyed the game. It was a lot of lessons in it. I relaxed here a little bit and won. I didn't find knight f4 right away. I played by hand here. This was a typical move, rook f to 8. I lost the second pawn. Then I find knight f4, and I went in this position and I won the queen. But white had a lot of material for the queen, and I did not find the best move h6. I tried to be fancy with f6, and I weakened my seventh rank. And then the white rooks, they come in on the seventh rank, and actually, if white will just not rush giving up the two rooks for the queen, we know that usually two rooks, if are connected and active, are stronger than a queen. So if he will improve his king position with h3, creating a loop for the king, and then push the pass pawn, and then in the end activate his knight, then black is lost. Instead, I knew he's going to give up his two rooks for the queen, and I went into this endgame, and I activated my king. I cut the king on the second rank. I disconnected the knight from the king. I start picking up his pawns. I start threatening mate in the back rank to win tempos. I took every chance out from the knight to come attack me with checks. I created a pass pawn. Pass pawn must be pushed. Go baby go. And then I start fighting against his pawns with the rook from behind, not in the front, from behind. So the rook does a double job. It cuts the king on the second rank, and I can stop his pawns. All right, I'm waiting for the pairings for the third round. It's still not up. This is the pairings from the second round from last night. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and like I told you guys, we will start the classes on Monday, January 6th, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in Yardley, and we're gonna open up a new location in Doylestown on Tuesdays. We're gonna start January 7th. All the information is on the website, and you guys can also see everything that we do on our Facebook page. All the events are here with the dates, with the time and location. You can see pictures, how many kids are in the classes, what age. We have a lot of beginners. We also have the monthly tournaments, second Saturday of each month. And I hope you guys enjoyed, and I see you guys soon.